need one too. Yep. We've got enough.
Oh, that's fine. Thanks,
Okay.
Lottie.
Yep. All right. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Burnside Council. Please stand for the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land that we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority over Aboriginal people visiting or attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who gave their lives for this country and its people. And we pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all those who reside, study, work in and visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. I welcome members into the gallery and ask them to observe in respectful silence as the Chamber deliberates on matters that relate to the City of Burnside. Should there be a fire or any other emergency, the alarm will sound and you are asked to follow directions of Council staff. I need to remind all that Council meetings are live streamed through the City of Burnside website and a copy of tonight's agenda is available by downloading from this website. I remind elected members of the importance of using their microphones appropriately so that those at home can hear clearly, and please turn off your mobile phones or onto silent. Right. Apologies, we have one from Councillor Hubel.
And I have
Yes,
one
Councillor.
from Councillor Davis, who was called away very late last night and left on a 6 o'clock plane this morning to represent the Burnside CFS fighting fires in New South Wales. So he wanted to make a leave of absence but can't because that needs to be in writing several days beforehand. So he's asked me to apologise on his behalf, and I would also like to say I hope we are all together when we say that we wish him very well and that he comes home safe and sound and not singed.
Absolutely, and I think that what we're seeing in New South Wales is a devastating, massive disaster for those people who are in that community and even all the people of the City of Sydney because of the smog or the smoke that's affecting people's health as it curries across the city. And I think while I'm on that, taking that opportunity, I also mentioned those people who have perished in New Zealand at White Island, another environmental disaster that we cannot control, but certainly has had an impact on both Australia and New Zealand. Leave of absence, we have none. Confirmation of minutes. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Dawes, seconded Councillor Piggott. All those in favour? Against? Carried. There are no deputations, but you will note that there's a slight difference in what's written there. Instead of writing the word nil, there did come a concern from a resident at the last meeting who saw the word nil in the agenda prior to coming to the meeting and thought that that meant there were going to be no deputations. So we've now got this clarified that of course we can receive deputations right up until 24 hours before. So when this goes to print, it's too late to be able to put any additional deputations in or any deputations in. So that's why that's there. Petitions, we have none. Public question time, we have none. Now, questions on notice. Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. Not a question on notice, but I was hoping to seek leave from the meeting to make a personal comment, if I could.
Those in favour?
On what? Yes.
Those against? I did check with governance about this being the appropriate time. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Worship. Look, I won't go into detail because I can't, but at the last council meeting, there was a particular agenda item which was a bit upsetting to me. And as you all know, I like to speak very passionately about things. And I said something about someone that wasn't right. I did retract it at the time, but I think it's appropriate that I publicly apologise at this meeting. So,
Thank you, Councillor Carbone. Motions on notice. Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. I, Councillor Dawes, do hereby give notice of my intention to move the following motion, that the 2 additional elected members appointed to the CEO Recruitment, Performance Appraisal and Remuneration Committee in July 2019, as a reference number there is C12182, have their membership reinstated on the committee until the conclusion of the CEO's performance and probational review period and the associated processes and reporting. This would include the appointment of a consultant, if required, to assist the committee in this process. And number 2, that meeting quorum requirements increase from 3 to 4, and number 3, the terms of reference be amended accordingly. I have given a rationale there in the agenda on page 11, which you all would have read. Just a couple of additional comments to that. I did believe that the additional members on the interviewing panel did enhance the CEO recruitment process. Now the setting of the KPIs for the probationary period is the key next step. Now these KPIs must be approved by Council after the committee has undertaken a process with the help of a consultant to prepare a recommended list of KPIs. Now the committee could be 4 or 6 persons to look at those key KPIs. It is my belief, as I indicated in the rationale, that the preparation of the draft KPIs and the subsequent approval by Council would also be enhanced by the inclusion of the 2 extra elected members who were also members of the interviewing panel. It's very simple for me, just having a broader skill set and a broader workplace experiences of those committee members will help produce the best possible KPIs for the new CEO for the probationary period. A very, very simple statement from me. I'm seeking your support and would be pleased to seek a seconder. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Henschke, do you wish to make any comment?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is absolutely a marvellous motion. Very, very important that we have the continuity. We've got incredible skills. We have decades of skills of Councillor Dawes, Councillor Piggott in running organisations, and we need of the highest calibre, and I very much welcome this and do believe we need to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Turnbull.
Well, I won't be supporting this motion. The committee was elected to appoint the CEO and it's completed its job. And thank you to the committee, 5 elected members and a mayor for all your hard work. However, the process of formulating the KPIs and monitoring their performance during the probation period should be the business of all of us elected members. The composition of the CEO Recruitment, Performance and Appraisal and Remuneration Committee was divisive. The members of the committee, 5 EMs and the mayor, nearly half the council, had all the knowledge and the rest of us had very little. Accessing confidential documents was difficult. So I think that this new task is a task for all elected members. We have, earlier this year, worked as a cohesive group to make decisions. Everybody was part of the process and everybody should be part of it. So if the present motion is defeated, I'll move a different motion which says that all elected members are engaged in a workshop to formulate the KPIs for the CEO and be able to contribute to the appraisal of the CEO as the probation period is completed.
Councillor Davey.
Oh, thank you. I have a question, and certainly acknowledging Councillor Turnbull's comments. Do we have a situation, I can't recall the process for development of the CEO's KPIs, but is there a process for it to be presented to the whole of Council to discuss and determine?
Can I just respond in that? Because we actually, at the end of the CEO committee prior to this meeting, we discussed that. What Councillor Turnbull has suggested would mean a complete rewriting of the terms of reference for the committee. But what does happen and has happened in the past, and Councillor Davey, you would remember, that the committee writes the first draft in conjunction with a professional, and then it is given to all members for them to make comment on and provide feedback. So everyone would be consulted, but not be participating in the actual decision making. That goes back to the committee. Correct me if I'm wrong, governance people.
So,
The question, Councillor Davies?
thank you. So would it be unreasonable to have a whole council doing that development?
The terms of reference would need to be completely changed, which would then take us a little longer because we couldn't do that till January next year, the end of January next year. And by that time, our new CEO will have actually been in the job almost a month. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I thank Councillor Turnbull for her thoughts. I too will not be supporting this, but I'm not supporting this for a number of other reasons. The first is, I feel that making these modifications on a 6-month basis, and then perhaps on another 6-month basis, Councillor Dawes has done this more than once, and then perhaps on another 6-month basis. And in the end, this is how we've always done it, and it doesn't really matter what the terms of reference say, is one of the reasons why the state government legislates us and screws us to the wall for things like the Development Assessment Panel and the Audit Committee, composition of other committees that they can control. We have terms of reference for this. We have 4 members on this committee. This committee functions very well and has done with those 4 members. This is just another little addition. And I'm not sure how this can value add, because I don't believe that the extra 2 people value added in a real sense anyhow. I'm not sure how this can value add, and at some level I feel that Councillor Dawes is keeping in his comfort zone of Father Knows Best Boys Club, because that was one of the things I was asked when I came back in here. Yes, here we go again.
No, I don't. I think that Father Knows Best comment might be reconsidered.
And that was what I was asked when I came back here. Was that a boys' club meeting? And yes, it was, unfortunately. So that's my first point. My second point is, if it is important for this council to have an extra 2 members for enhanced skill set, I'm looking across the chamber right now and I see 2 women that actually have qualifications in HR, that actually have experience in HR. So if we're going to enhance the skill set for setting KPIs, if we feel that we need another 2 people on that committee, let's actually enhance the skill set for people that have got HR experience, as opposed to what we've got now, 2 extras that are a couple of blokey accountants. So that would be my second point. So I feel that this is, again, a bit insulting to the original committee. The broader skill set is an extra 2 accountants sitting, well, 2 accountants that have been brought on there. It was the luck of the draw, and if we do want to change it, let's come back to the chamber. This has been a subject of, this is the 5th or 6th motion about this committee since the previous CEO resigned. Let's have a good look at the terms of reference for this committee and let's see whether it suits this council, because I, for one, am a bit concerned that this comes back to the committee every couple of months. Pretty much every month it's been coming back with another motion. If we are that desperately unhappy about this committee, or if some sections of this council are unhappy about this committee, let's have a workshop, let's have a report, let's have a debate about what it really should look like. Let's be very clear about its terms of reference, because fiddling about at the edges like this is a really poor way of governance. It is a shocking way of governance. And so for that reason, this is the last council meeting of the year, and we're going to just throw in, oh, let's just do it for an extra 6 months. I don't think it's good enough. I think This committee deserves better than that, the people of Burnside deserve better than that, and the new CEO deserves better than that, so I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Monceau. Thank you, Councillor Dawes, for the motion. Unfortunately, I won't be supporting it. We just recently heard in the CEO committee that the probationary KPIs are set in the contract, and we won't be doing anything outside of the contract for this 6-month period, which would make, to me, the 2 extra people just sitting on there for a procurement process, which I think the other 4 did quite fine the previous time. So I just don't think, I think it's a bit of a waste of time, given the 6-month period and the KPIs already set in the contract for that probationary period. So it's not really needed at this point in time. So I won't be supporting it for those reasons, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Piggott.
Thank you. A question. If I was to propose an alternative motion to do as Councillor Lemon suggests and spill the committee and start again, could I do that tonight? Would that be or would I need a proper rescission motion on notice? And maybe completely new membership. So I would need a rescission, but I can't do it. Okay, all right. Because I have a certain sympathy with what Councillor Lemon suggesting there. I think actually we would benefit from that. I think we would benefit from perhaps, now that we do have a new CEO, reconsidering the composition of the CEO committee in its entirety. I guess given I'm one of them, I think it's more about, it's not about additional expertise and the fact we are only middle-aged accountants. Male. I don't think you did say middle-aged, to be fair. Perhaps I was giving myself a compliment there. Yeah. I think Councillor Lemon has actually rewritten history a little bit. I think the last time we visited this was when I did it, I think in late July. If she did say she was just 6 months ago, thank you, almost. 5 months ago. The feeling of insult, which I also accept, I think should be at my feet rather than Councillor Dawes's, because I did do it because I felt the committee would work better with 2 new members on there, 2 more members on there, and I think it has. I think the argument around this is not the expertise on the committee, it's the continuity across putting the agency in to recruit the CEO, putting the CEO in, and then properly assessing his abilities through his probation period. That's, as I understand, Councillor Dawes is running, which is why it's only 6 months. He's not here saying that everyone stays on forever. He's saying that through that key piece of business that it would be best to be the 6 that actually started with the process. And I think that does have merit. I don't think any of it is around us going down a slippery slope that the state government's going to take action on us, or being unfair to the people of Burnside or the CEO. I don't think it is. The fact that we are accountants can go either way, depending on the eye of the beholder. But it's really not about our expertise, I don't think. I think as 6, and we had our moments, but the committee did get through that. Councillor Turnbull's concern is different, and it's not really addressed by either way here. In terms of who should be doing the KPIs and whether that should be a committee matter. That's going to have to be a separate issue, I feel. But really this decision here is not a constant messing about with the CEO committee, and if it was, then perhaps the CEO committee should look at itself. Why are people wanting to fiddle around with it? It does imply a certain dissatisfaction, but it's not like it's been every month. I think it's only happened once before. And now is actually not a change to it, it's actually a continuing of it to the end of a process that has our CEO hopefully happily ensconced and happily through his probation period. That's what he's suggesting, so I will vote for it.
I have no one else on the screen, so it goes back to you, Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for all your comments. I'll just go through a couple of them. I love the word of Councillor Henske of continuity, because that's what it's all about, in continually and properly assessing the performance of our new CEO. It is a value add, in my opinion. Please do not see this as insulting or shocking, or it's not father knows best, or in my case, grandfather knows best. It's just a matter of using the best possible resources this council has. And that's what I'm about. It's not a waste of time, it's the best use of time. So I am seeking your support. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? That's one of the night. Since I have the casting vote, I will actually be voting for this motion. So that's certainly, division's been called, so those in favour, please stand. Councillor Carbone, Councillor Dawes, Councillor Jones, Mayor Monceau, Councillor Henschke and Councillor Piggott. Those against, Councillor Lemon, Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Cornish. You keeping up there, Rob? Yep. Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hughes and Councillor Davey. Motion is carried. Now we move to 10.2, appointment of Council Board Member, Eastern Health Authority, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Councillor Cornish, Board Member 1, and the Group Manager, City Development and Safety, Board Member 2. Sorry, I'll start again. I move that the motion, I do hereby give notice of my intention to move the following rescission motion in respect to Council Resolution of the 27th of November 2018, C11875, at the next ordinary meeting of Council for the City of Burnside, so that's today. 1, that Councillor Cornish, Board Member 1, and the Group Manager, City Development and Safety, Board Member 2, be appointed to the Eastern Health Authority Board of Management, and Councillor Hubel, Deputy for Board Member 1, and the General Manager, Corporate and Development, Deputy for Board Member 2, be appointed as Deputy Board Members to Eastern Health Authority for the term of the current Council. Be rescinded. So I've moved this way to rescind this motion of the last meeting, as I now have more information than was available when we were considering across the board and regional subsidiary appointments at that council meeting. There are opportunities for staff to represent the City of Burnside on some of these boards, depending on their availability. We have alternated in the past between the staff of City of Burnside and elected member representing us on boards such as, or subsidiaries such as Era Water, East Waste and EHA regional subsidiaries. And I understand that due to his significant workload as a group manager, the current incumbent is happy to make way for an elected member to assume the role.
Excuse me, but that comment about the staff member is not appropriate for us to make, or for any elected member to make.
Okay, so what do you want? Delete that? Sorry, I apologise. I therefore ask, oh, sorry, do you want to make, is it not accurate or?
Through your worship, I clarified in an email following your email over the weekend that if council continue to want the group manager to represent council, that person will continue to do so as they have done in the past. It's not a question of workload, it's a question of whether or not council believe it's the best person to represent them on the board.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I apologise if I misinterpreted that. I therefore ask you to support this rescission motion to allow nomination of and selection of an EM for the appointment to EHA. Thank you.
Is there a second? Councillor Cornish?
Certainly, I'll second the motion as it stands. I do appreciate the group manager on the Eastern Health Authority Board, which I also sit. I will say it was a revision of the charter of the Eastern Health Authority in the last 4-year term to make one an elected member and the other one pretty much anyone. So it could be an independent, it could be a staff member, it could be another elected member as well. It's been the first year at EHA with it. It has probably raised a few conflict issues, I would suggest, with staff being on a board of a subsidiary like that. And, you know, it's one that we ponder. We haven't really got to probably a bigger issue, and I know there are legal statements basically stating that there is nothing really wrong with a staff member being on the board as well. But I've certainly pondered and expressed my concerns previously whether or not staff members who have to write independent reports to this council about the Eastern Health Authority, how independent that would be if they're so closely aligned. And I take the acting CEO as well as saying that he has raised that in his email as well, and suggested that would be appropriately managed. But look, I do believe City of Norwood has 2 elected members. They elected to be the only ones to have 2 elected members on the Eastern Health Authority, and there's a bit of continuity there because of that. So I will support this motion, and it's nothing at all to say anything about our group manager, who is a magnificent person and knows his stuff very, very well. So it's nothing to do with that. It's just my personal belief that an elected member would probably be best served at this point on the board. Thank you.
So we have a nominator and a seconder, but have no one else wishing to speak, so I shall place it back to Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I messed that up and wasn't as accurate, and my apologies to the CEO. I also acknowledge and thank the group manager who's currently representing the City of Burnside on EHA, and this is no reflection on him and his abilities. So I hope you'll support this. Thank you.
Those in favour?
Just for rescission.
On the rescission motion alone. Those against? Carried. Now we move to the motion on notice. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. That Council 1, the motion on notice is EHA board membership. That 1, the Council determine an elected member representative to be appointed as board member 2 with a secret ballot process if required.
At this point in time.
And I guess at this point,
at this point in time, I'll call for nominations because we can't do 2 until we know whether there's 1 nomination or more than 1. So I'll call for Councillor Davey.
I'm happy to nominate.
You'd like to nominate
position?
Yourself? Are there any further nominations? No? If that's the case, there's no need for a secret ballot. And Councillor Davey, you will become the second.
Do you want me to speak to that, or
Don't need.
don't need to?
Oh, sorry, I need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Lemon. Councillor Piggott.
I've got a question. It's for the remainder of the term of the council, which is, EHA is different from East Waste. Can you explain why that occurred? Why it's not an annual election process?
I believe it's because it's in the charter that it's for the period of time of the council, of the 4 years.
Right, so presumably we've contravened
As I
the
remember,
charter. We've
that's the
just
way
dropped Magnus from it, which we did at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Have we? Is that what happens? How can that be?
I'm not familiar with the decision that was made, but when it was offered to us at the beginning of the year, this was the only option provided to us. Prior to this, I was on EHA board for 8 years.
1 year
with
at a time?
Councillor Cornish. No, it was for the full term.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Each time it was for the full term.
Okay, thank you.
Through the Mayor, can I just raise an issue with point 2 of the motion on notice, where it refers to the deputy? deputies, in terms of a deputy for the Paul Hubel and the General Manager of Corporate and Development. They actually need to be removed. I understand under the Charter there is no provision for deputies to be appointed. It was a hangover from the previous Charter, so to be correct, that should just be referring to Councillor Cornish and Councillor Davey. Thank you.
Shall I amend that accordingly? Ah.
Councillor Lemon already seconded. Are you happy to second the change? Okay. So the seconded has been seconded. Councillor Dawes, you wish to speak?
There's a question. Well, how come Councillor Hubel was made a deputy at our meeting in November of this year? Not November, last year.
Through your worship, it just wasn't consistent with the Charter at the time, and it shouldn't have happened.
A mistake. No one on the screen, so Councillor Davey, do you wish to speak again?
Thank you very much. I would be very pleased to nominate the City of Burnside on the Eastern Health Authority and act as number 2 to Councillor Cornish. I've served on the board on 2 previous occasions as an elected member. It's a very effective regional subsidiary. It does an incredible amount of good work, protecting the health and well-being of approximately 160,000 residents, plus all the visitors and students that it looks after, across the councils that we know of: Burnside, Campbelltown, Norwood, Payneham and St Peters, Prospect and Walkerville. And I agree that it's an example of council shared service delivery at its best. So I'm very happy to accept this nomination, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Right, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now we move on to 10.3. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. This motion relates to fencing at the swimming pool in Hazelwood Park, and I've I made a slight amendment to the motion that I've placed on notice. The motion is that 1, a report be brought to Council in March 2020 in sufficient time for budget and business planning deliberations, following a review of the status of the perimeter fencing and security of the swimming centre in Hazelwood Park with a view to upgrading this. And 2, that the report consider and address the heritage status of the park, retention of trees and associated vegetation, the security of the centre, local wildlife management and costings of any upgrade. I've moved this way today as I think it's timely that we review the perimeter fencing and security aspects of the Burnside Swimming Centre, which, as we all know, is located in Hazelwood Park. To give some background, a significant refurbishment of the swimming centre and its grounds was undertaken in 2014, and the centre reopened in February 2015. It now caters for approximately 110,000 patrons each season. However, at this time, no review of the rather ancient security fencing separating the pool on 3 sides from the open expanse of Hazelwood Park, which is the State Heritage listed iconic reserve, highly utilised by a whole range of age groups for all types of recreation. It was deemed that it will be looked at down the track when there was some funds available. And I think it's now come to the stage where some repairs have been necessary. The other main attraction, as we all know, of Hazelwood Park is the birds and wildlife which live in the beautiful park setting. So, as I mentioned, there's apparently a need to repair the fencing now, but there's been no discussion of a review to ensure this remains fit for purpose. There are 7 to 8 strands, I haven't counted them, strands of barbed wire fence atop the chain wire sections of fencing around these 3 sections of the swimming centre. I think modern security methods I think with modern security methods these days, we could look at what could be improved, I think, and we could do a lot better. So I think having a chain wire fence with barbed wire around a swimming pool in a park, which, as I've shown, handed around, also entangles wildlife from time to time, with koalas being caught in the barbed wire atop the fencing. I think we could do a better job at modernising the fencing, making it more up to date, and using whatever new technologies might be available to fence the swimming centre and for its security. So I therefore ask for your support for a review of the security and fencing of the swimming pool, and this be undertaken by the administration, and with a report of options which will allow City of Burnside to have a fit-for-purpose, best possible security fence, and which hopefully will include removal of the barbed wire fence from this lovely reserve. So it's merely asking for an evaluation and a report, so hopefully you'll support this.
Councillor Carbone, are you wishing to second this?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I am delighted to support Councillor Davies' motion tonight. This is not the fence of a pool. This is the fence of a prison. It is absolutely ugly, 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 and it has bothered me for decades. I remember going through the park as a child, and it was like that then, and I hated it. It was creepy, it was spooky, you got barbed wire everywhere, totally inappropriate for the jewel in our crown. And as Councillor Davey mentioned, 110,000 patrons visit the park, visit the pool every year, and this is what they see when they pull up in the car park. So it is very ugly, it is terrible, and I'm glad to see that we are finally taking action on this item. I suppose if I was to add any amendment, which I won't, but if I was, part of me would like to see a slight realignment of the fence that would give more space back to the park, if possible. I know when we did the realignment along the creek, it went in a little bit. I suppose if that was a possibility, maybe, maybe not. But either way, new fence, decades overdue, and thank you very much, Councillor Davey, for bringing this to the Council's attention.
Councillor Piggott.
Yep, a question if I may. I went and had a look at this fence. My question is the barbed wire. I mean, not unlike Councillor Carbone. Is it necessary in this day and age to have barbed wire up top a swimming pool fence?
Through the chair, no is the short answer. The chain mesh fence that's there at the moment, though, would not be appropriate without it because it's climbable. So the barbed wire is there because the chain mesh fence is there. If you were going to replace it with an alternative type of fence that wasn't climbable, then you wouldn't require the barbed wire.
Right. So if we were building this pool now and putting a fence around it, it wouldn't be a climbable fence. Right. So my second question then, will this motion doesn't mention the barbed wire per se, but would you see this being the report you bring back would address that issue? It would be a non-climbable, non-barbed wire fence, would it? Yeah, okay. If I could speak to the motion. I went and had a look at this fence because I wasn't sure I hadn't seen it for a little while. Actually, I don't agree with Councillor Carbone that it's a particular eyesore. I feel actually it is an old fence. It's clearly an old fence. It does sort of blend into the background a bit, though. I don't think it's a huge aesthetic problem. I don't like the barbed wire, though, and I do think it is worth the exercise ahead of the budget. Councillor Davies raised other issues as well, which I don't disagree with, but I think if for no other reason we get to see what it would cost to put a contemporary fence around it that did replace an old fence. It certainly owes us nothing, I suspect, and had no barbed wire. It cheers the koalas up clearly, and also I think would be would be welcomed, but it would depend for me how much it was going to cost. So I'd be really interested in what it looked like and what it would cost, and then we could make the decision then. So I support it.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Question is, do we have a koala conservation plan which is part of any of our strategies?
Not really relevant to this question.
Well, I would like to know if part of our strategies in environmental strategies, whether conservation of animals is part of our strategy.
This is actually about a fence.
But the thing is, if we have a strategy about koala conservation, my question is, don't we have to just build fences to help koalas move from point A to B anyway? Because whenever we erect a fence or invest in fencing, because we have lots of native vegetation, my point is that the how is up to the administration to put in the appropriate fencing for the locale. And in this locale, there happens to be koalas. So my question is, if there are koalas here that we need to allow movement of, my question is, shouldn't that be just part of our normal business as usual?
I'm going to ask, who's going to answer it? You or Alan?
I'm not, through your worship, I'm not going to answer that question directly because this motion is particularly about offence and a review into a reporting offence. However, the motion itself says that we need to consider local wildlife management, so the report will consider that in some context. However, first and foremost, the swimming centre pool, so the swimming pool fence is there for safety related management of people not accessing that pool, so it's not about the safe movement of wildlife.
I have a follow-up question then. Will this be a koala-friendly fence? We're talking about a full fence replacement here. We're talking about a koala-friendly fence or a security fence for humans?
Can I?
Yeah, you do it, otherwise
Through your worship, we haven't written the report yet, so we will determine that within the report.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Councillor Hughes.
I'm going to start with some questions if I can. I'm just wondering what the remaining asset life of the fence, the current fence, is.
Through the chair, the fencing on the northern side is due for replacement in 2030 and the southern side is 2035. So still 10 to 15 years.
And the replacement of the mesh is obviously on a different rotation to, or roster, doesn't sound like the right word, of compared to the posts and railings. Another question, have we had any security issues with the current fence?
Through the chair, there have been some incidents with people cutting the fence to enter the pool area.
Without trying to sound funny, because it's only 7:45, I am a little bit on the fence with this one. So someone was going to do it. I do spend a bit of time down there watching the kids swim, and I do feel that the current fence doesn't provide a vision. Now we're all on.
Now I'm on.
I'm flashing, but you're on.
I'll turn mine off.
Now we're on.
There you go.
Okay, so councillor Hughes, press your button.
Now I'm on.
Now, anyone else who wishes to also speak on this item
Yeah.
has theirs as well. I'm sorry if there's a file being listening has been lost, but we need to get this right, and you were correct.
That's okay.
Councillor Hughes,
I was just going to say that I guess the potential alternative is what I'm thinking about. And I did go for a walk last night down, I think, Roger Street, which has a SA water tank, which they've replaced with, what's it called? The black tubular type fence, and I'm assuming that would be the alternative in terms of a non-climb fence. That's kind of a question. I guess that's probably what the report is going to tell us. But I guess I see the current fence still has significant asset life left in it. I appreciate it is just a report, so I will sit and see how the rest of the debate pans out, but I don't personally think that the current fence is quite as visually unattractive as perhaps Councillor Carbone has pointed out, and I think perhaps the alternative in terms of having a tubular fence would draw more attention to the fence and actually detract from the park even further. So I'll sit on the fence for a bit longer and see how I go.
Councillor Henschke, do you have further questions?
Yes,
or you
I
want to
do,
speak?
please, thank you. One question and then I want to speak. My question is, it's again about koalas, because is there a problem with koalas drowning in the pool? Because this has happened. Koalas can't swim very well. If they get in the pool, they will drown.
Through the chair, there are no instances of that that we're aware of.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I would like to now speak.
No, koalas have been in the pool. I'm actually the person who uses the pool. I use it 3 times a week. In fact, I saw Councillor Piggott as I was doing laps on Sunday. He was walking laps. But there have not been any drownings. There have not been any drownings, but I've certainly seen koalas within the pool area,
right,
up in the trees, quite safe, and to a certain extent, safer in there than some of them are outside of the fencing, because they don't have kids throwing stones and things at them that sometimes happen in the park. Yeah. So anyway, the rest of your question.
Okay, no more questions, but I want to speak to this because I think it's really important that we understand what the problem is fully, you know, and we've heard about the condition of the fencing. Is that a problem? Probably not. The koalas getting stuck on the fence, yeah, that looks like a valid problem. But then the problem, we need to understand if we want to stop koalas getting in. So I think then before we just jump to some solution for a new fence, we do have to understand if it's stopping koalas getting in. And for example, if you want to stop koalas getting into the pool area, you have to put perspex or something slippery there so they don't climb up. On the other hand, if you want koalas to traverse the fence safely, you plant trees along the fence, take away the barbed wire, cheap solution, plant a few trees and then allow the koalas to climb over, and everyone else, put in some other security systems. So all I'm saying is that we just don't want to jump to a solution which is going to be, you know, $250, or it's about probably at least $300 a linear metre of fencing. It's going to cost us, you know, tens of thousands of dollars because we've put up a new fence. So we need to think carefully about what we're trying to do with fencing before we, and I'm sure the administration will thoroughly do that in their report, look at all the options as the acting CEO said. So thank you.
Councillor Dawes.
A couple of questions first of all. Unley, Norwood pools, what sort of fencing do they have currently, Michelle?
Through the chair, Norwood have something similar, so they've got a chain mesh barbed wire on one side, then they've got some colour bond on the other. Unley, I believe, have got colour bond. I'm not sure if they've got something else. Marion have just upgraded theirs, I believe, so they've got a tubular style fencing, but I believe that may have been done as part of the big upgrade they did recently.
Right, a second question for you. We've just spent some money on repairs of the fence, is that correct? How much has been spent in the last month?
Through the chair, I'd have to confirm this, but I believe it was around $16,000 to replace sections of the fence that were in poor condition.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of comments. Councillor Piggott, I walked around on Monday. All the young mothers are looking at me, but I was okay. And also I drove up Kensington Road, and when I looked across, I could see the whole of Hazelwood Park, the green behind, the green in front. So I'm a little bit worried about having spears in the ground and not being able to see through the fence to the other side and see the wonderful Hazelwood Park. And to me, that will make it look more like a prison, as was mentioned by Councillor Carbone. But I have to say it's in very good condition when I walked around. I think there may have been one missing strand of barbed wire around the back, but it's in excellent condition, so I'm not surprised it's 10 to 15 years of asset life still left. But at this stage, I feel quite comfortable with the fence as it is.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I have a couple of questions, issues that have just been raised. You'd mentioned through you, that the asset life of is it the tubular fencing is another 10 years?
Through the chair,
20
the asset
to 20.
life for the current fencing that's in place is around 10 to 15 years. So the northern side was around 10 and the southern side's around 15. Tubular fencing, we'd have to find out what the life on that is, because we obviously don't have that in place at the moment at that location.
That was going to be my next question. When was the tubular fencing installed? How's the asset life been determined of 2030?
And they didn't give the asset life tubular. It was all about the current fence.
Right. Yeah. And is any of that fencing material recyclable? If it's steel, it should be recyclable, shouldn't it? I'm just thinking if the fence was replaced, that we could recoup costs. I mean, is that unreasonable? With recycling?
Through your worship, you're unlikely to recoup costs, but you would get a certain amount for disposable metalworks.
Thanks. Oh, that's the extent of my questions. Thanks. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Monto. We've just gone out and done a lot of work with our asset management plans, haven't we? And the swimming pool was part of that consideration. I don't think I will support this motion as it stands. If there's 10 to 15 years left in the current fence, I get its view, but there are a lot of pool fences at the moment still currently with that barbed wire at the top. Campbelltown's another one that comes to mind, and certainly, the Paynham pool at Campbelltown. Sorry, that's what I meant. I think it's a little premature at this stage to ask for a report to look at a new fence. I concede that it was on the agenda for the renovations of the pool only a couple of years ago, but we did run out of money. We decided to invest in a kiddie pool instead of the new fence. When you've got to shave some money off, sometimes the nice things at the end have to go. So the fence has still got some life into it. I do agree that it's not that ugly far away. It is probably up close. But at the same time, I also agree that you can actually see through it, and it's one of those magnificent parks where you can see the green. And that's something to behold too, rather than just seeing a black wall that I think you probably would if you went with another fence type. So I probably won't support it at this motion, but we're going to have to look at it probably the council's going to have to look at it in the next 10 odd years. And I would suggest maybe some consultation and demos up in the park so people can choose and pick which fence types that they'd probably like, because I think that would be a requirement.
Councillor Carbone, you have some questions?
Question, Your Worship, just one if I can. Michelle, there's been a bit of conversation tonight around koalas and so forth, and there are a lot of koalas in Hazelwood Park, and we love our koalas and so forth, and I know it's been a hot issue, especially in the last probably year. Just wondering, I know it's mentioned in the motion here, but just to ensure that it is koala friendly, as Councillor Henschke mentioned, would you be able to consult with, like Adelaide Koala Rescue and Fauna Rescue when sort of selecting or recommending a fence type?
Through the chair, we can do that. Any consideration of any new fencing type would be subject to a risk assessment of what we're trying to achieve out of that fence and the risks for that particular site. So it would also be captured through that process.
Okay, thank you.
I might just add that koalas climb the golf course fence behind my house, and it is higher than the fence around the swimming pool. Admittedly, it doesn't have barbed wire because it's not actually trying to keep people out. But the koalas navigate that fence extremely cleverly, and in fact climb pretty much any fence that they can get their claws into or onto. The big issue with this fence is about keeping people out who should not be in there at night when the park is dark and when the pool is then vulnerable to being trashed. Now, we've been very lucky that that has not happened very often in Burnside Pool's history. My son worked at McGill Pool, and a number of times over a few years, people climbed over a fence as high as that, sometimes even with barbed wire on it, and got into the pool and had a lovely party. And beer bottles and broken mess had to be cleared up, which meant often the pool had to be closed. So the issue is really about the security of the facility. And I just want to also point out from the community survey when the pool was being redeveloped, the community survey actually indicated that the community did not want to see any giving more back of the pool back to the park. So in terms of the boundary, they actually said, we don't want it to go back to the park. In fact, it was more that they would like to have more space within the pool area. And if you were there on, was it Sunday, it was massively being used. Particularly in the afternoon. There was barely a piece of grass you could sit on. And the demand on when you get heat waves is massive. And like I said, I swim there 3 times a week. I love being able to look out, and this has got nothing to do with the which kind of fence. I love to actually be able to look out through the fence as I'm swimming, and you don't actually see the fence at all. You see the top, you see the bars, but you don't see the mesh. It's like a tennis court fence. If it was painted black, I would see it. But because it is a bit old and tarnished, you don't actually see it when you're in the water, and it isn't unpleasant to the eye. Most of the other pools that you've talked about, and I've swum in them all many times, have either buildings that form the perimeter, part of the perimeter, or they are not placed in a park setting like this one. Payneham is not in a park setting. Marion's not in a park setting. It takes up the whole site. I'm talking about the outdoor one. Tea Tree Gully is the same. It takes up the whole site, and it has barbed wire around sections of that as well, but it's got buildings around a lot of the perimeter as well. So whatever you decide, the issue is this fence is doing its job of making sure that the people who use that facility have maximum use of it, rather than the pool being closed because of damage that's done when people do climb a fence. And I've watched kids climb over a higher fence than that very quickly at school at night and break into buildings without any trouble whatsoever. So as soon as you make it easier, it is a problem. And we're trying to protect that asset. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I have a question, if I may. Do we have CCTV? And that's on of an evening inside the pool area?
Through your worship, I think the CCTV is mostly focused on the building areas, and it is on all the time, but there's also perimeter beams with the fence, so that sits inside the fence, that if it's broken, then it contacts the security company and they come out.
So we don't have CCTV in sort of from a distance looking into the pool, so somebody could drown there potentially without us knowing about it until we discovered them the next day?
It's not monitored the whole time.
No, okay.
I don't have anyone else on the screen. Then I'll go back to Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's interesting. Thank you very much for your contribution, everyone. It's really interesting that there are lots of questions about the fencing around the swimming pool. All I'm asking for tonight is for a report that we actually explore, look at, assess and explore all these options. I think we could, there's been no risk assessment carried out for the situation of the pool, the fencing, the perimeter fencing, the security aspects. All of these issues haven't been formally assessed. If they have, I've never seen any report. We have asset management plans. It wasn't clear to me that this was being upgraded. As the local ward councillor, no one talked to me about any upgrade to the pool fencing, and I would have had lots to contribute because I know what my community and constituents think about it. I remain concerned about the also the vegetation alongside the western side of the perimeter fence. There are a whole lot of 6 or 7 river red gum saplings that have grown and been established with all the work that has been done on that side, and I think they're just intended to be ripped out because I don't know why. They apparently present some sort of security risk. I acknowledge that the security, as the Mayor has said, the security of the facility is paramount. There's no two ways about that, and I don't deny that. But there are many options, both electronic, CCTV, chain mesh fencing that can be seen through. I'm not denying that we want to make things block out the view, the wonderful view that people both inside and outside the pool have of the park. I just think we can do a whole lot better in Burnside, and I don't care if there are barbed wire fences in a couple of other pools that were mentioned. I think with the facilities that we've got, the standards that we've got, and this is our iconic Hazelwood Park, our beautiful state heritage park, in which we have this wonderful swimming pool, so heavily subsidised and visited, that all I'm asking for is that we have a report to assess all of these issues, and then we can consider whether it is too expensive or whether we can put in other means of providing security and upgrading it. And in the meantime, I don't think it's acceptable that we have koalas getting caught up in barbed wire fences. So please support this. All I'm asking for is a report. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. Please stand. Those who supported the motion. Councillor Lemon, Councillor Carbone, Councillor Davey and Councillor Piggott. Those against, Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Dawes, Councillor Jones, Councillor Henschke, Councillor Cornish and Councillor Hughes. And I think I said the motion was lost. Now we can move through to...
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
I wish to put a motion up without notice to protect the koala population.
Oh, you can do it any time if you're willing.
Well, can we...
If you're willing to accept it.
Questions without... I was just going to go questions without notice first. There are no questions without notice. Motions without notice. What's your motion? Because without notice,
To simply
need to see the urgency of it.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. To simply put to the chamber that we have a motion without notice for the administration to investigate the risks to the koala population in Hazelwood Park. Considering there has been published tonight a photograph of a koala stuck
That's
in
really
barbed
old.
wire. I'm not sure where it came from.
Years and years old.
Okay, I don't know. It was just put in front of me tonight
yeah.
with the assumption that this is what's happening in our pool.
Apparently it was 2014.
Right. But nevertheless, if I can put a motion without notice.
Can I?
Unless it's done already, unless this is a risk which is just part of your business as usual and the administration has got this
I'm inclined
underhand.
to think that this
Yep.
probably requires a motion that is not as urgent as of tonight. I have no concerns if you would like to present that as a motion on notice at first meeting of next year, and perhaps you could give it some consideration to the second part of Councillor Davies' motion that was just lost, that something
Yep.
could be incorporated into that in terms of the whole, looking at the problems and the issues to do with nature conservation
Yep.
or animal conservation within Hazelwood Park.
Well, that would be very constructive,
And so I think
you.
that could be
Yep.
something that you and Councillor Davey could work on for the
koala,
beginning
yep.
of next year. And
Yep.
Councillor Hughes, of course, who's in that ward area, for the future. But
Thank
maybe
you.
it should not be limited just to Hazelwood Park.
Exactly, I
Because
totally
we
agree.
have the increasing issue. Koalas not anywhere near as bad as the loss in New South Wales in bushfires.
Absolutely, thank you.
But, so if you're happy with
I
that.
am very happy, thank you.
Good. So we'll move to reports from officers. Is anyone who would like to withdraw 13.1? Councillor Piggott, okay. 13.2, Councillor Hughes. Minutes of the Audit Committee, 13.3. Right, failing that, is there anyone who'd like to move? Councillor Hughes, you're moving in accordance with the motion there. Councillor Dawes, seconded. All those in favour, carried. So that motion was carried? Yep. Okay. Now we move to corporate and development, 13.4. Anyone wishes to withdraw that? If not, Councillor Cornish, you're busting to move it.
I was.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Hughes. I'm using the screen. Sorry, it's Councillor Hughes. You moved it.
No.
No, I didn't. I've contradicted myself. You are first on the screen.
Oh, you were.
So therefore, no, you're first on the screen. And
Because you flicked off. He
sorry,
flicked
you
off.
were.
Cornish was on
Sorry,
first.
Councillor
I was
Cornish was
flashing.
on the screen.
He flicked
It's
off.
now gone from me. And Councillor
happy to give
Hughes,
it.
you're seconding. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. 13.5, Dulwich and Rose Park. Councillor Henschke, you'd like to withdraw it for discussion, for debate later? Okay, thank you. The pathway, 13.6, Bluestone curbing. Councillor Henschke, I think you might, yes, Councillor Davey, you'd like to withdraw that one for discussion? City of Burnside Environmental Sustainability Strategy. Anyone wishes to? Thank you, Councillor Davey. Right, we'll go back to 13.1, Councillor Piggott, I believe.
I've got a couple of questions. I'm happy to, want to move it as read, but I've just got a couple of questions if I may. Is that okay? Yep. Report be received. Yes, I've got nothing more on that. Hopefully the questions won't raise anything. It's just a question in regard to the, on page 29, the bluestone guttering in Rochester Street.
What page are we on?
29, electronically, anyway. Yeah, 29. There's $143,000 due to a scope increase due to bluestone guttering in Rochester Street. And I was just wondering how that came about, actually, the background of that.
Through the chair, so we had a road resurfacing project scheduled down Rochester Street in line with our asset management plans. Rochester Street has bluestone curbing, which is visible. At the time of programming that work, there was no bluestone guttering visible, so the asphalt surface was laid over top. In situations like that, we don't know whether there's bluestone guttering underneath the asphalt or not. In some situations there is, in some there isn't, in some there's bits of it but not substantial bits. So we don't know until we scrape back the old layer of asphalt whether there is or not. When we did do that scrape back, we found the bluestone guttering intact under the asphalt layer. So in line with our bluestone curbing policy, we needed to clear that off, clean it up and rehabilitate that and keep it in place.
So it was intact, but it still needed $143,000 to get it back to the way it was. Right. And the guttering is the flat bit. The curbing's the curbing and the guttering is the flat bit. Is that what's going on? Right, okay. And at the moment, we don't know how much of that we've got around the city. It's only when we redo a road and take the bitumen out, is it?
Through the chair, we do have a register of bluestone that we're aware of.
Bluestone curbing?
Bluestone curbing, well, and we've got a register of bluestone guttering that we are aware of, but as you've rightly put, we do often uncover bits under old asphalt surfaces which we're not aware of, and we then retrospectively add to our register.
Right. And do you have any idea what length of guttering? I drove down Rochdale when I was going to the swimming pool. Any length? I spent a lot of time over there the other night. Any ideas what length of road $143,000 gets you? Well, I didn't quite know what I was looking for, to be honest, and I didn't actually notice much. So, but I mean, I suppose, perhaps that was slightly rhetorical, so I'm happy not to take that answer. Right. I think I would just like to talk to the point, though, if I could. This is part of the. We have a policy of, as has been followed in this case, of if we find bluestone guttering under bitumen, we need to rehabilitate it, and for Rochdale, and I think there is a distinction between guttering and curbing. I don't have any particularly, but I think there should be a distinction between the two because the visibility and aesthetic, etc., is quite different, as you'd imagine. So it is part of our policy. I guess my one last question is when that policy is due for review, because I do worry that, we meant to spend $587 on all the road resurfacing so far, and we've actually spent, 20% more on that, just on Rochdale. So, I don't know, Rochester, sorry. I'm not sure what Rochester was supposed to cost, but I suspect the 143 is a big chunk on top of what we thought it would cost. And if we're exposed to that too often, in regard to bluestone guttering we don't know about, I do question whether we should be doing it as a matter of course and having budget overspends like this one. So, yeah, my question is when the policy is due for review.
Through the chair, the next scheduled review is March 2021, but obviously council is at its discretion to ask for that to be brought forward if that was something that council wished to do.
I think that may be the case. Thanks. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Michelle.
Councillor Henschke, are you seconding?
Yes, and I have some questions. Regarding page 23, actually, firstly, I just comment on page 19, the monthly activity of the acting CEO. I'm not sure whether the CEO attended the ceremony for the 100th anniversary, or you were, yes, that's right. And I was just confused with Martin and yourself. That's right. As to who attended. Thank you. Which was a fine event. Thank you. The question is regarding page 23, response to state planning reforms. Will the public, ratepayers and residents, have an opportunity to be consulted on the response to the draft code, which elected members will have a workshop on the 30th of January? And will the residents and ratepayers be made aware of the heights of buildings that could potentially happen to them next door in the future by way of a map very similar to what the Norwood City Council has prepared for its residents and ratepayers? Will the City of Burnside prepare a map for residents and ratepayers clearly showing the zones for different height developments, different colours? I have seen this for the City of Norwood. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer the first question. I'm going to leave the hard one to you, Mr. Schroeder. The first one is that there are two scheduled, I found the advertisement in the paper on Saturday in the Advertiser. There are two scheduled public consultation meetings on Wednesday, that is tomorrow night, at Glenunga Hub for anyone locally to come. It doesn't mean just Burnside. The first one is from 4 o'clock till 5:30. And the second one is from 7 o'clock till 8:30. A couple of people have contacted me and I've given them those details. I just happened to see it advertised in the paper on the weekend. There are some other ones scheduled in other areas of Adelaide, but the local ones are here at Glenunga Hub tomorrow night.
So my question, Mayor, was is the City of Burnside going to host its own information sessions, because those information sessions are from the State Planning Commission.
Yep.
And Vicky, we had an MP session, we've got these SCAP sessions, and I believe other councils having their own sessions. So my question is, are we going to have our own consultation sessions, briefing our residents and ratepayers with specifically what's going to happen to them in the future?
Through the Chair, we hadn't planned to do any such sessions. If Council would like us to, we can look to squeeze them in, keeping in mind, of course, the submission is due by the end of February, so we've got tight timeframes on those.
Through the Chair, I believe the last question emanates from an article centred around Norwood, Payneham, St Peters. So at this stage, the question kind of sits in the we'll take it on notice bucket, because we haven't had a chance to interrogate Norwood about what they think they found and what it means for them, and to extrapolate that over to us. So we'll certainly take that on notice and come back with some kind of communication.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I just had a couple of questions. One relates to the biodegradable and compostable dog waste bags trial. I just wondered, I haven't seen any trial going on, and I just wondered where it was and how that's progressing. Because we've got a report due.
Dr. Oatman.
Through the Chair, thanks for the question. The trial is in progress. I apologise that it's been late in implementation, but the bags are now in place at Glenunga Hub and the Glenunga Dog Park, and there are bins there and signage as well.
So they're the only places we're trialling them?
Yeah, I believe that's in accordance with the motion that was put forward, yeah.
Thanks. And we'll have a report then on...
Working on one now, through the Chair.
Thank you.
Keep a lid on the excitement.
We might as well have something to look forward to in 2020. State planning is not something we're looking forward to. Okay.
I have another question.
You got another question?
Not
Certainly.
Phil. I can't see anywhere in here about legal expenses and legal expenses to date, and I just wondered if anyone had any idea of those. Please.
Through Your Worship, we don't have that figure offhand, but we can take that on notice and provide it to you.
Thank you. And then one final question relating to Councillor Piggott's query about the road resurfacing program and the budget variance. Does that relate to, I wasn't clear if the road resurfacing related to bluestone curbing or bluestone replacement of that, or bluestone guttering?
Through the chair, the variation was in regard to the bluestone guttering that was found underneath the asphalt surface on Rochester.
That's right, but did we have to replace that?
No, we
Is
didn't.
that what the cost was? Sorry.
No, we didn't replace it. We had to clear off all of the asphalt that was on top of that bluestone curbing. The road had to be reprofiled to allow for appropriate drainage back into that guttering then. And we had to do some work to crossovers into private properties as well to allow for that too.
Thank you. Thank you. I have no more questions.
With a toothbrush.
Councillor Piggott.
I was just picking up on Councillor Henschke's question about the briefing session just for Burnside. I like the idea. Does it need perhaps an amendment on this motion tonight to make that happen in early February or late January? Do you think? That's a question.
Governor's office just suggested that we run the motion straight after this one.
Oh, okay.
Let this one go through and run one as a subsequent motion immediately after.
What, we don't do amendments anymore?
Can I just ask, have you thought about who would be running this session?
I'll give it some thought by the time you ask me to do the motion.
Okay.
If it's me. Thank you.
It's such a can of worms. It's such a can of worms. And so many concerns by so many people. Okay, so it's back to Councillor Piggott. I think you withdrew this motion for debate. So do you wish to speak again, or you would just go straight into the vote? Okay, so those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Carried. Now, do you want to do it now?
Yeah, I want to do it, yeah.
Okay.
Could I then raise a motion that that administration... Can I discuss this a bit? I guess what I'm saying is if we did it in early February, it's probably okay. I'm getting up the fact that perhaps it's not an idea that perhaps need to be mulled over a bit. So rather than say, let's do it. So if I was asked to have a plan... Yeah, although if you bring it back to me at the 28th of January, you'll still need to book somewhere to do it about a week later, so I'm not sure it's going to work. I don't think it's realistic. Look, I think we should raise that administration provide a briefing session, public briefing session specific to the issues relating to the City of Burnside of the new planning system. Prior to, is it 20th February? What's the cut-off? 28th February. Prior to the end of February 2020. And on that, and I think it's, I've been to a few planning sessions and done by DIPTI and, being sort of at a higher level. There are some issues here, I think, and look, it wouldn't be straightforward because I've been to a couple where it's been pretty hard to keep a lid on, people throwing rocks and the like. But I do think that Councillor Henschke's raising of the issue that having something that is specific to the big hits on Burnside is actually important to do. And I think it could be facilitated by administration without... it wouldn't be straightforward, I get that, but I think it would be, for the people who were well behaved, it would be really valuable, and perhaps really valuable in perhaps activating them to respond to the consultation, albeit you'd have to put up with some people who sort of wanted to make a noise. But I think it is worthwhile, and it's finely tuned. I would be looking at probably early February after they've come back from holidays, but still gives them a couple of weeks to put into the consultation. And it would talk about, obviously, heritage, but it would talk about the zoning and the residential zoning, which was... Well, actually, there's about 8 things in the letter that was sent out today that we've responded to. I think it would be worth telling people individually that. So I hope you support it.
Councillor Henschke, you wish to second that?
Oh yes, thank you, Mayor. I wish to second it, and Without amending that excellent motion, to perhaps implicit in that would be, my question is, implicit in that motion is that the administration will take all opportunity to engage with the residents and ratepayers, perhaps through social media, live streaming the event, engaging with people beforehand that they can't attend, giving them the encouragement to put submissions in to the State Planning Commission, just basically facilitating their engagement leading up to that event. Thank you. And so that's a question in there, but am I right to presume all of that? Thank you.
We'll take that on board and we will see what we can do.
Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
I would do this somewhat differently. I think the idea is extremely good, but I think that I read the administration's response to the planning today. There's a letter to go, and I thought it was excellent, and I think it should go as it is. As it is soon, next week. I think what that does is it gives us headings to do a community consultation, but the headings aren't all there. I think the other thing that we need is to talk to people and get their views on things like block sizes, because in Linden Park, in Glenside and in Glen Osmond, we're going to end up potentially with block sizes of 200 square metres. So I think this gives us a fantastic opportunity to get a community response. So I think we're probably trying to do too much with one meeting, and I think our letter should go, and I think we should have the meeting, but perhaps we should have more than one meeting. In our annual community surveys for the last 4 years, at the end of the survey, and we survey 800 people, at the end of the survey we say to these people, are you prepared to participate in a focus group? We've got their names, we've got their addresses, and they've said yes. So the first thing we can do is, yes, call public meetings, but also we could use those people that have said yes, they're prepared to be in a focus group to actually do a bit more in-depth stuff. I think this is a really good idea. I think we need to galvanise our people. I think we need to galvanise them quickly. But I think what the administration needs to do is send its letter off, because it's an excellent letter and I've got no problems with it. I think it addresses everything. But between now and the first week in February, the administration needs to look at the people we've already got in terms of those we can tap on the shoulder and say we want to have some focus groups, sorting some venues, and yes, let's have one in Glenunga Hub because that's close to Glenside, but let's also look at having one in Linden Park, and let's start publicising it now, asking questions of people, come along with a view on this and this, be very clear about what we're going to ask them, be very clear about what we're going to use the information that they're going to give us, like saying things like, we want your views on block sizes, we want your views on parking, we want your views on height restrictions, and we're going to use those views to form a submission to the plan, to this open consultation, and you are going to be the residents of Burnside, and we will send this, we will collate this, and we will send this in for you. And I think that's how it needs to be done. I think that the voice of the people is very powerful. The voice of the council is powerful too, but it takes place at a different level. And I think that our job in this is to coordinate the voice of the people, not to corral it, not to do anything else, coordinate it, translate it and submit it, and keep those people on our database in this ongoing way. And we need to think about the questions that we're going to ask them. So that's how I think it's got to change.
Councillor Hughes?
Yes, I will support the motion. I think it's a great idea. I think we need to get the community on board. I did just want to acknowledge the effort of the staff and the article in the Focus magazine as well, because that does a really fantastic job of encouraging people to have their say. And I think it really gives people an insight into the reforms and those that aren't as connected to it as what we have been over the last few months. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well, that the staff obviously are doing quite a lot in the background, but I think giving people an opportunity to have a forum where they could ask questions similar to some of the forums that we've been at would certainly be relevant and worthwhile.
Councillor Jones.
I do support the motion, but I also think what Councillor Lemon is saying is right. So I wonder if you'd accept a variation, not provide a briefing session, but make it provide briefing sessions. Because frankly, I think Linden Park alone, we'd fill a meeting. I'm sure that you'd fill a McGill meeting. I'm pretty sure you'd get a Glenside meeting. I'm sure you'd get a Kensington Park meeting. So and then it also means if you can't go to one, you can at least go to your neighbouring areas. So I wondered if you would support that variation.
Can I just make a comment? When we met with Michael Lennon earlier, about 6 weeks ago, a lot of the issues that we were very clear to him that our community were concerned about came from the discussion, but the attendance at all of these public meetings that have happened already. I went to the Norwood one, been to the Linden Park one, and it's important that those concerns are expressed, and they were clearly expressed to Michael Lennon, weren't they? And this is another follow-up. I spent most of a day yesterday at Garrock, and most of the day was focused on criticisms, issues, concerns. I think there were about 14 mayors and some staff from different councils, and there will be a report going to the Minister or to the State Planning Authority from Garrock about our major concerns. Mind you, by the end of the 3.5 hours of discussion and listening to conversations and people speaking, and I've got a document that I will get out to you. I think Rob was going to work on that so that you get a copy of it. By the end of the day, we actually made ourselves even more depressed. When you start digging deeply into all of the major concerns, all of the concerns that are really, really clear, when you find out the depth of incompleteness of the draft, of the concerns that relate specifically to the opposition to greening, the concerns about neighbourhood character, and that we didn't even touch on heritage yesterday because that's another complete different ballgame. The concern about these sort of sessions, and I'm not negating them in any way, shape or form, is what do you focus on in that? And how do you get from the feedback from the people who come to those meetings? Because you don't want an argument session. It's almost like it needs to be opportunities for people to sit and talk about in groups. And this is what we did yesterday, and I'm just providing this as an exemplar. And it follows on from what Councillor Levin said about focus groups. We divided into 4 groups. A group about greening, the concerns people who had about green spaces in new developments and in the urban infill. We had a group on neighbourhood character. We had 2 other groups, I can't remember what they are. But people actually, instead of it having all focused on one person who's giving all the talk and copying all the concerns and the questions based from some people's perspective on a lot of knowledge, but other people's perspective have got no knowledge at all, to actually divide them into some sort of section like that, where people actually who have got a prime or focused interest, urban infill, greening of our city spaces, that could be an alternative way of thinking about how we run these sessions, because I think we've all been to, and I'm certainly going along yet again tomorrow to hear state planning, hear what they've got to say yet again. And I've already been told they don't answer questions, they take the questions on notice, and then they say at the end of the session, we're not going to actually reply to you anyway. But I know there's a number of Linden Park people going to that because they've contacted me about it and about their concerns about the size of properties.
Talk about this motion.
Yes.
Thank you, through your worship. I'll ask Aaron to clarify our proposed timeframes, project plan and our intent at this stage. I'd just like to get clarification from the Chamber in particular on how you want Council's response to be informed based on the feedback that we are receiving just now. The project plan that you've previously endorsed for this didn't allow for this additional type of consultation and briefing session. If Council wishes to do this, that's not a problem. We can certainly look to redo the timeframes. We'll have to look at the resources required. Also, if, and Aaron will confirm this in a second, I believe the plan was to have a workshop with all elected members on our proposed response, followed by the council meeting to endorse that proposed response in February, to allow us to meet the timeframes towards the end of February. We can certainly do these consultations and briefing sessions. One could actually have a separate response or consultation as part of that process, or we can then also inform the council response as well, but we need to make that quite clear.
As the mover of the motion, before he answers that, could I just make the comment? I feel that the discussion by the chamber has gone inconsistent with where I was taking it as a motion, and perhaps it was the motion needed to be better. But I don't see it as necessarily informing our response to, well, I don't see it as informing our response. We need to do that other ways, and Councillor Lemon is quite articulate in some of those ways. But these, I don't see that. I see them being us telling our residents, specific, I thank you, Harvey, in terms of having them specific to zones, because the issues are different in different zones. Kensington Park and Kensington Gardens have got, you know, that line going straight up through the middle between the two residential zones. That is a major issue for mine. And I see it as us doing what we need to do as a council on their behalf. But I do see it as very much us telling them the way we see it and what issues there are, and if they see that as a problem, activating them to say themselves that it's a problem. That's what I see. And putting our response back and getting that right, I think this is not a resource in it. That's what I'm looking to have happen. And I think that changes the answer.
I don't have anyone on the screen, so I'm happy to go back to Councillor Piggott. Well, I think, was that your summing up?
It wasn't, okay. No, it wasn't. I was just fearful, and I mean, we did cover a lot of ground there and wanted to do a lot of things, and there are a lot of things to do.
Yes.
And I don't think this is about actually the project, the plan in terms of what we do as a council to go back in the consultation and present what we need changed. I don't think that this affects that. This is about telling all our the residents who are willing to come really what the issues are. Now, we're going to say, look, we're going back in and we're saying we don't think this is a good idea. They could tell us they think it is a good idea, and perhaps, you know, that may be the case, but I think it really is informing them the big hits specific to their area and what we're doing about it and what they could do about it before the 28th of February if they chose to. That's what I think, no more, no less. And I understand it is more resource, but I think it is worth doing. I think it's something, you know, would be really valuable. So let's do it.
Okay, those in favour? Those against? Carried. To Era Water, that's who you also council. No, it's Councillor Hughes.
I will move the officer's recommendation that the report be received, that the independent report prepared by Tonkin be received and noted by council, that a workshop be held in early 2020 for elected members and Era Water representatives to discuss the status of progress against key project deliverables and matters raised through the independent report, that the acting CEO provide a copy of the Tonkin report to a copy of the Tonkin report to Era Water with a copy of this resolution. I think there are a few key things which hopefully most people have pulled out of the report. I guess it's been an interesting year with Era Water. We've obviously, as new elected members, got on board with that, and I think there's now good direction and focus for us to move forward. There are obviously a few key concerns around the rainfall volumes that we've had this year. I have just received the board papers for the next meeting, and it's worth noting, I guess, that the rainfall for this year is one of the lowest rainfall periods or something on record. So obviously we've had a bit of a challenging year from that point of view. And then also there is progress on the additional bores, which hopefully will increase the capacity that we can harvest. So I think there's lots happening. I think this report gives us some areas to focus on, and I guess with myself as the current board member and Councillor Piggott now being appointed as the audit committee member, gives us good focus to ask the right questions of Era Water and make sure that from a financial point of view, obviously able to place ourselves in the best position for the project going forward. Aside from that, there's also been discussions at the board for the General Manager to begin negotiations with potential customers. So I guess the review of the reporting within the Era Water Board, there's also been comments around the fact that we need to be realistic around some of the reports that are sent back to Council, and this has certainly been challenged over the last few weeks. I think some of the reports that have come out have been optimistic, and I think within the board there's now the realisation that the performance over this last year as commissioning continues has certainly been a bit of a challenge, but I think there's certainly good response and good collaboration as we move forward with the project. It's also been, as you will have seen from the papers, looking at sensitivity in terms of pricing and demand so that we can understand the potential position from a financial point of view. So I think the report as it stands gives insight to elected members to see perhaps, I guess, where some of those concerns are, but I think it's early to... There's still lots of things to be done, I guess, is where we're at with Era Water, and I'm confident that we're making good progress as a board, and also with the opportunity for us to have a workshop in early 2020. It will give all elected members an opportunity to ask questions.
Councillor Cornish.
Happy to second. Don't want to speak. Thanks.
I've got some questions, if I may, and I draw attention to page 40 and paragraph 15. Part 2. Terms of reference for the review be drafted and agreed by Councillor Hughes. I would then ask you to cast your eye to the bottom of that page to paragraph 19 and 20, where you see that at this, we in fact appointed Councillor Piggott and Councillor Hughes to run this project, but when the project starts getting run and meetings are made with Tonkin, the Mayor is involved at both the meeting on the 26th of September and also at the meeting on the 4th of October. Now, the Mayor was actually not asked by this chamber to be involved in this. I noticed that the Mayor has also, in her report at the end of the agenda, page 433, says, I attended with Councillor Piggott and Hughes a meeting with administration to discuss the up-and-coming Era Water Tonkin report and relevant matters. Well, whatever the relevant matters are, but certainly the Tonkin report. The Mayor was actually not part of that specific project, nor was the Mayor actually appointed by this council to be part of that specific project. So I would like to know from the mover of this motion, not the Mayor, why the Mayor was involved in this. Thank you.
Right, we have no other discussion.
Oh, no, you do now.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so just a minor amendment, please. I'm seeking to make an amendment, and if the mover would accept these a couple of extra words, if the mover would accept this extra couple of words in number 2, that the independent report prepared by Tonkin Consulting, and this is just a couple of words, be referred to the Audit Committee and be received and noted by Council. Now, this minor amendment is important because the terms of reference of the Audit Committee is very clearly set out, and I quote, "Consider and provide comment on the financial and risk-related issues associated with any council business," and it has to be referred to it by the council. So, following process, we have the opportunity here to refer to the Audit Committee so they can get on with their terms of reference. So, can that be accepted, please? If it's not...
We've just checked and it's okay with governance. Seconder for the amendment. Councillor Hughes? No? We need a seconder first. Councillor Jones? You're happy to second that amendment? Okay. Now I think I have to have the screen cleared so that if people want to debate the amendment, because the names that are on here at the moment are the names that were for the original motion, or the comments. So, Councillor Jones, have you got do you wish to speak to the seconding of the amendment?
No, but I had a kind of question, and I would have put what I hope would be a variation on point 4. Is if we're sending it to Era Water, I would suggest we send it to our 2 fellow shareholder councils as well. That was just... I'll do that. Okay. So, no, I don't need to speak on the... I'm just sort of... I thought I'd second it so we could have
that's fine. Councillor Hughes, do you wish to speak or ask a question on the amendment?
I wish to ask a question on the amendment, yes. So, this is the first time in a year that I've seen a motion us referring something to the Audit Committee. I would assume that the Audit Committee can have access to any of the information as who determines what information goes to the Audit Committee.
Yep, through the Mayor, the Audit Committee can request information and the Council can refer information to the Audit Committee. So both are options. The normal agendas for the Audit Committee are prepared by the administration. So the administration in the first instance will collate the agendas. But
would it be typical that this type of thing would just go to the Audit Committee anyway? I'm just perhaps debating a moot point, but whether it's necessary to include it in the motion or whether it would just happen without us debating this.
Through the Mayor, I think it's fine to leave it as an amendment. The Audit Committee, every time it sits, does generally undertake a review of one of our regional subsidiaries anyway. So Era Water will be, I think it's probably the next one, back on the agenda for a revisit. So this won't do any harm at all, and it will be just provided to the Audit Committee on Council's recommendation.
Thank you.
Councillor Piggott, are you wishing to speak on this amendment?
Yep. Look, I was just going to make the point. I think the terms of reference talks about they can consider and provide comment on any of the council's issues, but not necessarily every. So I think it's not necessary as a matter of fait accompli that the terms of reference say that they need to do that. Having said that, Mr. Cooper pointed out there there's no loss in it particularly. I mean, it is a major financial issue for the council. So I'm happy to support the amendment.
I have no one on the screen, so are you happy for me to put the amendment, or do you wish to speak again? So, no, there's no summing up in the amendment. Okay. So, those in favour? Those against? Carried. The motion as amended. And any further discussion? Councillor Dawes.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say a few words because we haven't really gone into the depth of the Tonkin report, and I just wanted to highlight some things here. And I've been saying it for about 6 months. I do understand it is extra responsibility on councillors Pickett and Hughes as regards the oversight and ongoing monitoring of the ERA water scheme, both from the audit perspective and the board perspective, but it is a whole of council matter. It's not just those two. And I'm very pleased they are involved in those roles, but it's more about how we see it. To me, there is an urgency here, and this is the point I've made many, many times. And I want to see this resolved in the first few months of 2020. I don't want to keep going on until the end of 2020, and we still haven't made a call upon that. I'm very happy to have a workshop. I think that's a very good idea. I'm pleased that ERA Water are undergoing a strategic review process, and they say that will give us a little bit more reassurance. I'm pleased about that. But if you look at the Tonkin report, and there's some red flags here that I'm kind of, oh dear me, that, you know, like twice they have said it's not unrealistic for council to expect more detail on the design aspects of the scheme. Twice in regards to 2 different questions. And the reliance on the fractured rock aquifer, yes, is the greatest risk. Oh God, that's another one. There are high operations and maintenance costs. The asset management plan has not been cited. The capacity of the network to meet demands is another uncertainty. It has a 50-year design life, not 70 years. And there's even a query if 50 years is realistic. In USA, it's 30 years. In Australia, it's 50 years. So all those things, to me, give us a great concern. That's why I'm seeking, especially from Councillors Hughes and Pickett, an urgency to resolve this as soon as we can so we can get some clarity on all those things that have been mentioned in the Tonkin report. But I think I had to say that because otherwise we're just, you know, thank you for doing all that work, Tonkin, and it's there, thank you very much, but there's still much more to do. Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Yes, I just want to speak to them. I asked questions. Oh, yes, I made an amendment.
The amendment, so you can't
no
speak
comment.
now. Okay.
Yep.
Councillor Piggott.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to respond to Councillor Dawes because I think he's wrong in only one part, but he's largely right. The Tonkin report continues to fly the flags, red, in regard to issues that we were concerned about, and ERA Water hasn't sorted them out yet. The bit you're wrong about, I think, is I don't think we'll be able to sort it out in such a short time as how you would like to. But what is happening, and I think, and it's happening beyond Sarah's involvement, and I haven't done anything yet because I haven't been to a meeting, but it is, I think, happening within ERA Water more, is a realisation of you know, needing to really communicate better, I think, with all councils, including Burnside. The issues are really, and one of the issues is that, one of the big issues is that we haven't had enough water go in there to test all the hoops we got to go through to actually get water back out again. And that is at least a year, I think, down the track, and hopefully a reasonably wet year. I think there is some urgency for mine, and I think this comes out of it. Where the key issues are is that we shouldn't be spending money on infrastructure for a higher volume of water until we actually know we're going to get it in the first place. And the second is we need to work on, or 3 actually. 2, you need to work on the operating costs, which are high and perhaps necessarily high at the moment, but they need to come down because they are obviously the one of the few things you can change and that impact the bottom line. And third is there needs to be more, was going to use the word honest, but that's probably unfair. That is unfair, I won't use that. But in terms of there needs to be more realistic, I think, budgeting and information back to member councils in regard to what's possible in the short term. And it won't be good news. It won't show lots of water being sold back to member councils and improvement of the bottom line. What we don't know quite yet is whether we can get it back into good news, to be honest. I'm certainly not standing here saying it'll be okay. However, there is, I think, a year or so that we've sort of got to go through, knowing what we're in for, to settle the thing down, get some water in, get some water out, and that's where we're up to. So Councillor Dawes is right, and I think there's not. The Tonkin report actually I thought was really good. It was, you know, I'm not sure what we expected out of it, but it did give us a third-party look at what was going on, and it did show up the key plays. They're coming back from Era Water too. If you look at what all the board papers, you know, they are talking about all the things Tonkin talk about. It's just that they haven't at the moment got enough water through to say positively it's all going to be okay. So, yeah, it remains a major issue. I don't think it's a short-term fix. What is short-term is keeping the pressure on Era Water, and I think the idea of sending this to the member councils, working with them as well to get through this period to find out whether it will work or whether it won't. And it's still possible it won't. So I think that's right, and that's why I think the motion is right. We should accept it, we should send it back to them, we certainly shouldn't ignore them, and we should keep up the fact that, you know, Barry's spoken to Era Water a lot more than our previous Chief Executive has already, I feel, and that all does help. So I think that's why the motion is supportable, should be supported.
Councillor Hughes, I think it's back to you.
Thank you. I will begin by responding to Councillor Lemon. In terms of the motion that was agreed to by Council, it was that the terms of reference be developed by Councillor Piggott and myself, and that was certainly the case. So the initial few meetings that we had, it was just Councillor Piggott and myself that developed the terms of reference with the CEO. Can't remember if it was the acting CEO or the CEO at the time. It was, yeah. So that certainly was the case, and Mayor Monceau was involved or became involved in the lead up to the Mayors and CEO meeting with Era Water, and given there was potential that there would be questions asked about the report, it was known by the board that we had the resolution to...
See, mine's working.
Yeah, we've all...
It's supposed to be a short meeting.
Oh, hang on.
Just
Now
hang
I'm
on.
flashing.
Go.
No, just, oh, good, yeah. I will finish up. So yeah, as I mentioned, in the lead up to the Mayors and CEO meeting with Era Water, the Mayor was invited to attend those meetings to ensure that she was up to speed prior to attending those workshops with the other Mayors and CEOs. So I hope that addresses the question, but certainly in terms of developing the terms of reference, that was Councillor Piggott and myself with the CEO of the time. There are a few things that have been mentioned this evening I think it's just worthwhile closing off on. First, I think the Tonkins report talks about developing an asset management plan. The agenda that's come out for the Era Water meeting on Friday actually does have a draft asset management policy as part of that agenda. So there's certainly, I guess, some traction I feel happening with the board over the last 6 months to make sure that things are moving in the right direction. And as Councillor Piggott mentioned, there is certainly a focus on realistic reporting back to Council, and that was mentioned at the last board meeting, that we don't want to be getting the reputation as a board for continually coming back and reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. I think so that's certainly one of the focus, and you will have seen in the last few board papers the sensitivity in terms of the financial reporting at the back of those papers in the finance section. So it's certainly a focus of the board, and as Councillor Piggott said, one of the next things is for us to focus on how we can create savings given the situation that we're not able to sell the water, but also focusing on looking for potential customers and getting them on board, because that is also key to the success. And at the last board meeting, the board did give approval for the general manager to go out and have discussions with potential customers, and that is in progress. So confident that there's a lot of things happening, but appreciate that there are still some risks and concerns that the elected body potentially has, and I think having the workshop will give us the opportunity to have an open discussion with Era Water and raise any of these concerns. Thank you.
It being 9 o'clock, so we've got to go to vote first. Those in favour of the motion as it is? Thank you. Those against? Carried. So we have an option to have a little break now or finish the 3 that are on this page. I'm guided by what would you like to do? I'll move to have a 10-minute break. 10-minute break. Moved and seconded. Those in favour? Carried.
Why are people not enticed today? Mavis told me not to. Seat 27, shit.
I'm a lot more dumber than that.
What's all that? I don't know. Matthew. Matt. Sorry, I got all these other.
Now, those amendments were made just by engaging with my fellow councillors this evening. To my left, Councillor Peter Cornish. Consultation is critical. We need to engage with the community. The more we engage, the better we perform. Consultation before we make changes to parking is very important. The Rose Park Dulwich area, you're aware, runs along Fullerton Road. This motion is about creating a business parking area. So those businesses can operate successfully, their employees have got parking available. So we separate business areas from residential areas. I think I'll leave it at that, and you can ask questions of the administration. Thank you.
Just through the worship, can we just get some clarification, please, on point number 2? Are you suggesting that we undertake consultation to determine whether angled parking is supported, and if it's supported, then we proceed?
Yes.
Just further to that as well then, have you got a recommended consultation process zone? Are you...
Yes, I would, I would ask a planner in the same way that a planner would define a consultation zone for development applications. I would think that a planner of sorts could make that discretionary decision.
Is that Peter?
Councillor, unfortunately, I've got seat 5, seat 24, seat 26. I have no idea who those people are.
Okay.
So, assuming while we're waiting for that, it's you, Councillor Cornish.
Thank you. I will second the motion. I just did want to clarify with the wording of 5 whether or not, for example, paid ticketing parking systems is appropriate in that location, or whether or not it should be to explore whether or not we do paid ticketing. It should be a separate item, just in terms of, do you understand what we're sort of asking for inclusion in the report, whether or not paid ticketing systems can be explored as well?
Through the chair, certainly we can explore the option of paid ticketing system. What's not clear from the proposed motion is which areas that would be in. For example, is it Victoria Road, Slip Lane, for example? And 5 seems to be a bit of a blend of certainty and not certainty. So the certain bit is about us bringing back amendments to the parking policy, allowing for the introduction of the business parking permit. And that would include discussion around how we allow for distribution of the permit, what the price for the permit would be.
Yeah.
They're the sort of things that they're the key headings in terms of what we'd investigate for the business permit system. The ticketing thing probably needs a little bit more work.
Yep.
Before we can recommend amendments to the policy. So it's almost like a separate body of work.
So you think it should be a separate report?
Potentially.
Or should I, if through my co-councillor, the mover, whether or not I move it to an item 6, that a report regarding paid ticketing systems in high usage or high parking areas is also considered.
And through the chair, it's almost a predecessor report because we can't really finalise the whole business permit system until we know whether the ticketing system would
be an option.
And the key things, I guess, around the ticketing system is where would it go, how much do they cost, how much would it cost the capital cost, what's the ongoing cost, if there's going to be a flat charge or whether there's going to be a discount for business people, how then does the machine know, how can we communicate with the machine and relate? So there's a lot of questions that we need to work out answers to. So the ticketing thing is probably the first step in a couple of steps.
Okay, so it might delay it if we put in the paid parking systems. Ooh, I'm now at a little bit of a loss. If you're okay. Can we remove that bit, Robert? For example, paid parking system, paid ticket parking system. Sorry, Grant. And you're happy with that, Lillian? Okay. Yes, I'll move it. You guys have really done a good job here. A lot of work's gone involved. You've been very innovative. We've had a number of meetings with the staff regarding the potential of a new business parking permit system, certainly along the Fullerton Road side and just next to the businesses. So putting a line basically where the urban corridor zone is and saying this is business parking areas and residential, you're this side. So it's quite a novel opportunity to actually provide a little bit of leniency for the businesses as well that do pay rates, and also provide better parking management in those high use areas. So I'd love to see how this is actually going to work, and obviously it's a further report after investigating it, and this is just giving in principle support. So I think it's something that we can certainly look into, so I hope you support the motion.
Just explain, the system's not working. All I'm getting is seat numbers. So I'm just going to be looking to see whose light goes on next. And if I can't see your light, could you put your hand up as well? I can see yours because it's clearly clear. Some of them are hidden, and I don't know who it is because I have no idea who seat 2 and seat 24 are.
Happily, my light has gone on. I have a question. The issue around the paid was sort of instigated a little bit by me, and it was very specific to the Western Fullerton Road. You described as the Western Fullerton Road service area, or those words in some order, next to Victoria Park. My question is there ever been any discussions with the City of Adelaide about sorting out the ownership of that land, because it probably more sensibly sits with them rather than with Burnside, given Fullerton Road is it's on the other side of Fullerton Road, and I understand the same's the case on the northern side of Greenhill Road.
Through the chair, certainly not as part of this process.
No, I understand that.
I'm not sure whether they're. I think the answer, unless someone can say otherwise, is no.
No. Yeah. Okay. Could I propose an amendment? I think it is worth looking at it. It was, and I did send one through. I don't know whether that can go up or I need to rewrite it. I mean, obviously number 2 changed in the original motion from what I sent you, so that if you could sort that out for us as well. And perhaps one question before I finalise that, it talks about April 2020 staying, albeit us looking at the viability of putting paid parking into that area. Are you telling me that that may be a difficult deadline to hit? I'd like to see them presented together. I take your point about the payment one needing to be first, but I think it would be sensible to have them presented together. So April 2020 is still okay?
Through the chair, I may be being a little bit conservative, but it might be a little bit early if it was going to be inclusive of the pay. We just don't know enough at this early stage about how long it's going to take us to. So there's a little bit of conservatism in there.
All right, perhaps you can come back to us. If you do find out it is too conservative, you might if you can do it, that's great. I'm sure we'd accept that you needed to push it out if you gave us good reason before April 2020. So if I just, the amendment picks up the original motion around the amendments to the report for the amendments to the parking policy. And 5.2 talks about a report around the viability of putting paid parking into the Western Fullerton Road service area. Now, there's 80 car parks in there. These are the ones that do belong to the city of Burnside, albeit that they are, very much connected to Victoria Park. And they are seen as a resource for our business people to park in, and I think that works okay. But the fact is that they are actually of reasonably high value, as I'd see it. There's paid parking going in around the parklands in all sorts of areas. City of Unley's introduced it on the northern end of their city. A car park these days there is probably worth $10 to park up and take a wander across the parkland into the city, and the rest possibly. And on that, you're looking at a car park just on business days being potentially worth $2,000 a year, and we've got 80 of them. So that's $160,000 a year. Plus, if you wanted to put it on the weekend, which perhaps wouldn't be unreasonable, but we may have an issue with our neighbour in regard to the City of Adelaide. But it's actually quite a resource, and I think it is definitely worth looking at whether that would be viable to do that. You can still do the give our residents or our business people an advantage in that. They may still pay, but they might pay a $5 instead of 10, for instance. But it's still an asset of Burnside's that we are making most of, as opposed to just sort of relatively passively just letting it sit there. And it does mean if our residents don't need it or our business people don't need it, other people can use it, but then there is a payment back to the City of Burnside for an asset that it owns. So I think it is something worth looking at. It is something that will only increase in value. The technology around parking now is getting particularly good. It's no longer about some guy having to go along and punch out all the 20-cent coins and bank them. It's not around that. The technology is very strong, and so I think you will find that it is actually very doable. Whether it's economic, I don't know, but I think it is an asset that's worth getting on for $200,000 as a revenue, and I'd be surprised if that didn't have something drop out the bottom, but that's what the report's for. So what I'm seeking support here for, and it may delay getting the bigger picture done, but I don't think by much, unless we choose to do it, and then it's in a good cause. What I think we should do before we just go through and give that asset away for free, we should look at whether we can make that work better for us, and that's what I'm seeking in this amendment. And I seek a seconder.
I need a seconder. Councillor Davies' microphone's not on.
Oh, I think mine's on. I got in.
Councillor Henschke, it can't be you to second, so Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I don't need to add anything further, but I think this is a very valid amendment. Thanks.
Seat 17, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be seat 17, and I'll remember that from now on. I just have a question. Yes, I have a question. When you put this report together in terms of looking at costings for potential parking in that area, and potentially also on outside of Fullerton Road for business, would you also be looking at things like offering businesses monthly, yearly, annual parks at perhaps a reduced rate to getting a ticket out of a machine? Would you be looking at that as well? Because the whole point of this is to actually support our businesses to have parking. So I'm just wondering whether, you're just going to go down the track that we've just told you in that sort of way, or whether you're going to keep the faith in terms of making sure that businesses in Burnside have got a bit of a drop to park and riders from T3 Gully or wherever else. Any other place that is not Burnside.
Through the chair, look, I think the answer is yes, we'll explore as many options as we can and certainly look at the options of... it's not entirely clear to me how this is going to play out, but it's almost as if the report about the ticketing machines cannot be after the other report, because the other report's a holistic look at the whole system. So it's almost as if the report about ticketing the ticket machines needs to come first. Potentially, we'll talk about this, I guess, internally, but at the very latest, it needs to come at the same time as the overall report. So what I'm saying there is it's either going to be two reports, ticketing first with an in-principle decision around that, followed by the holistic approach, or we may be able to do it as one hit. But yes, we will look at how, if at all, we can get ticketing machines to respond to differential approaches, different people. So normal people and business people. Can you have a system? Yeah.
But then you still get anybody outside Burnside.
Well, I think the answer is really around what technological solutions there are. To how can you program the machine to accept two different kinds of tickets? Can you have park and riders paying $10, for example, $10 for example, to ride to the city, walk to the city? Can you have a system whereby the system knows that you're a business person from Fullerton Road and therefore you're only paying $5 or whatever? Or can you have an annual charge that you can insert into the machine? These are the sorts of things we need to... we've got obviously more questions than answers right now, but we're at least starting to work out what the questions are.
And number 17 wants another question. Please go ahead. Oh, I'm flashing.
Oh, no, it's going to be 25. We think that's you, Councillor Jones.
25? I thought it'd be seat 13 working backwards.
Now you're 13.
Seat
So
13.
you're 13. And you're next.
Okay. I'm happy to let Councillor Lemon continue her line of questioning.
But then you're going to lose it, I think.
No, I'm happy to come back to
You
it.
need to, and then we'll go to Councillor Lemon.
Okay. Switch off. Switch off.
No, have your question.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
all right, have a question.
I think this is a great idea. I would like you to consider auctioning off the parking spaces. You could go to local businesses and say, you could buy the rights to this parking space for a year, and I think that's the way we'll get the maximum value out of this valuable asset that Councillor Piggott has drawn our attention to.
Thank you. So the next question that I'm asking is, we're looking at technological solutions, or you're looking at technology, but there are already existing things that we do, like resident parking permits that are transferable, and businesses could be offered something similar to that as equally, you stick them in the dashboard on a monthly fee. So I'm just, you would consider this in your report as well, whether it comes first, second, or at the same time. Yeah.
Through the chair, yes, we need to consider what form the permit would be. Does it insert with a machine? Is it a manual thing like the residential one? How do we distribute it? Because it will be a finite resource. There will probably be more demand for the permit than there are spaces available. How much do we charge for it? Are they transferable or not transferable? So these are all the things that we would need to cover off on.
And I'll speak to it now, if I may. I actually think that I think that this is a really good idea. I think it's a revenue stream for council, and I think that they're valuable pieces of land that we've got on the other side of Fullerton Road with those 80 parks. But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that we've got valuable pieces of land in front of people's houses as well, and we need to be mindful of balancing those. And I think in this report you actually see that is balanced very well between needs of residents and supporting local businesses. And I'll just make this other point. And I'll always make this other point now. I sat on what was then the Development Assessment Panel when we approved, I don't know if you were there, we approved what was originally Gerard Industries, you know the one I mean. And they came back to us 3 times, and the only reason they came back to us 3 times was every time they said, look, here's the calculation for the amount of parks we should have for floor space for this building, and we just like to reduce the amount of car spaces. And I think they took us to court. They might have, I don't know, they had lawyers. And then they come back a second time and said, well, you actually reduced it for us last time. We only want another 2 reduced, a bit like an extra 6 months. No, another 2 reduced. And we sort of did that. And then they came back to us again. And in the end, they were 7 car parks down on what the calculation should have been. So the fact that that particular office block, which doesn't actually, has got lots of tenants now, and I was in it recently, doesn't have enough parks for the people that work in it, really is its own fault. However, I'm happy to relieve them of their money. And forevermore. Thank you very much. And any of the other buildings, and let's not forget that under the original 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide, and also the, I don't know about the Planning and Development Code, I'm going to have to go and have a look at that, but that section of Fullerton Road was supposed to be 10 stories. So we were going to get 10-storey office buildings along that section of Fullerton Road, and everybody was jumping up and down. And I remember people saying, it's imperative that you're able to see the vines at Penfolds from the parklands, because we always have. And it's imperative that you see the hills from the parkland. So there was such a to-do from the community about putting high-rise on Fullerton Road that it never really happened. Not that I was worried about it, because the real estate's worth too much for it to be changing hands often. But I think we need to be mindful of that. I think and the point that I'm making here is, as we approve new buildings, let's make sure they've got enough parks in them, so that when we use our 80 parks and gather our $200,000, $300,000, increasing, because they go up every year. I park in the city, I know how much they go up. Our increasing amount of money from those people that park there, let's make sure that the new buildings have enough.
Thank you, Mayor. Question? Yep. A question on 5.2. Is it possible for the revenue for paid parking to go into a fund for the betterment of parks or something, and basically just not putting the revenue into general revenue, but funneling the revenue generated from parking in those sort of areas to good causes? For the community.
Through your worship, absolutely. When the report comes back, council can determine if they proceed with that, whether or not they would like to set aside a particular fund, but there would be a certain mechanism that you'd have to follow, but anything's possible.
And a little idea I heard fly across the floor, is there a possibility that the funds generated, the revenue generated, could go to good causes such as reducing rates or any other matters? I don't want to be suggesting anything now, but you could explore, will you be exploring a range of opportunities?
Not in this report, no.
I think we have to get this report first.
This resolution doesn't call us to go that far. We would follow the resolution of council in this case. If then council wished us to explore further, you would need to give us that instruction at that time.
Can I just ask you, there are 3 cafes in the grandstand area on the other side, on that side that you're talking about in relation to parking. Now, they are not Burnside businesses. They'd be Adelaide City Council businesses. They are frequently used in the mornings 5 mornings, I'm not sure about weekends because I don't go there on the weekends, but Monday to Friday, those cafes are utilised frequently in the morning, and a lot of people park there to dog walk. They have morning fitness classes there on the oval right in front of the grandstand. They have the cafe users, there's mothers groups and dog walkers. So they are all looking for casual parking on that side of the road in order to do those things. So I think they do. I know we're not catering for businesses in Burnside, but there is an established need already there, Monday to Friday, and probably weekends as well, for those early times in the morning. Anything from 7 in the morning right through till 10:30. Those are prime parks. Yeah, but what I'm just saying is that we do need to consider how people are, the kind of length of parking spaces or availability for those cafes, because those cafes could be completely run out of business if there was no parking available for them. And I just thought I wanted to make that point. Okay. Do you wish to sum up?
We've got to move the amendment first.
I was on.
Seconded Davey, carried, we've done that. We haven't voted on this amendment, on Councillor Piggott's amendment.
Oh, I'm not going to speak.
So, can I have an answer to your question? Will it impact the businesses? No?
Of the amendment. Those against, carried. Amended. Those in favour, those against, carried. (13.6) the Parkway Bluestone curbing. I can't remember who did that one. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move in accordance with the officer's recommendation. Thank you. 1, that the report be received. 2, that council approve the engagement of a consultant to undertake an engineering design and provide an estimate for construction of works in relation to remediation of the bluestone curbing and guttering in the Parkway Leabrook. 3, that the cost for completion of this design be included in the next quarterly budget review and presented to council. And 4, that following completion of the design and construction estimate component, a report be presented to council relating to the actual construction and implementation of these works to be considered for inclusion in the 2021 draft annual business plan and budget process. Thank you to Michelle and her team for undertaking all this work. I think it's all very straightforward. In the interest of brevity, I don't think there's anything I really need to add. It's just progressing the matter after the expression of interest process and developing the designs and taking it to the next stage to develop costings. So hopefully you'll approve this and support it. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Hughes.
Seconding, not wishing to speak.
You're number 26. Right, I've got 24 now. Well, that's me. It must be.
Says Hughes.
All right, Councillor Cornish. Councillor Cornish
Yeah,
to speak.
I just wondered whether or not the blue plaque, you know, it might be optional for residents, but maybe council could put a blue plaque and say how important this road is. But anyway, just a thought.
Are you preempting things? Preempting. No, haven't got that phase. Yeah, so Councillor Hughes. Oh, Councillor Hughes. Okay, so Councillor seat 6. That's Councillor Henschke.
Thank you. I've got a question to Michelle, please. I just wanted to clarify this motion and what you do anyway with asset management planning, why did Councillor Davey have to raise this? I mean, is a condition of the bluestone curbing in a certain priority anyway in your asset management planning, or is this a separate thing altogether, or do we have to develop an asset management plan for bluestone curbing in due course?
Through the chair, curbing is included within asset management planning. This curbing hadn't reached the end of its life and was due for replacement. The motion on notice that was raised was around to, similar to the question that Councillor Piggott raised earlier, was around clearing off the asphalt from the bluestone guttering that's currently in place, addressing some ponding issues that exist down that street with the bluestone guttering, partly due to the bluestone guttering, partly due to the fact that it's quite a flat street with bluestone guttering, removing the asphalt driveway crossovers and reinstating the bluestone that sits underneath those, and then all the complementary works that need to be undertaken to make that work.
So you essentially, we would have gotten onto this in due course. It would have been on our list of things to do.
Through the chair, maybe not to this extent. So our current bluestone curbing policy talks to, we will clear off and rehabilitate bluestone guttering where the street basically has sufficient gradient to allow it to drain properly and there's not significant portions of cobblestones missing and that sort of thing. This street wouldn't have met that criteria in terms of the slope. However, it was raised that this is the only local heritage listed bluestone curbing and guttering street we have, and so it's probably a little bit of an exception in terms of the way it's managed when compared to other streets.
Thank you for that.
Back to Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Just briefly to reiterate what Michelle Kennedy has said, this is a special issue in a heritage listed street. I commend the motion and thank the staff for their work to this stage and hope you'll support it going on to the next stage. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. 13.7. City of, I think that was Councillor Davey as well.
Thank you. Draft environmental strategy. Very important. I move 1, that the report be received. 2, that Council endorse and adopt the draft City of Burnside Environmental Sustainability Strategy 2019 to 2023 with the inclusion at the wheel or whatever the map is of manage water for best value to the environment and community, recognising the multiple sources and uses of water. And 3, that Council note that the administration will develop a detailed action plan during the first half of 2020, which outlines specific actions and timeframes for tasks to deliver against each of the priorities in the strategy. And an elected member workshop on the action plan will be facilitated in February 2020. So I thank the staff for all their work on this and for the very interesting community consultation. The whole approach has been excellent. The only amendment, with the interests of brevity, is that in the diagram on page 167, that's this one, I think we need to include in that, I don't know how you talk about the design, it's right at the top corner that everybody can see, where we've got manage water for best value to the community. I've just added to the environment and community, based on the fact that we are investing heavily in the environment. We've acknowledged that we are in a period of climate change. We've made a significant investment in Era water for our aquifer storage and recovery. So this is harvesting water so that we can actually irrigate better our parks and reserves at a more effective and more cost-effective rate. So that's just reinforcing that in that design or diagram. So that's the only small change that I've made. Thanks again. I hope you'll support it.
Seconder, please. Councillor Hughes.
I will second, but I don't wish to add anything further.
Good.
Number 17. It's one of my lucky numbers. I just want to ask a question of how you see this change. Do you see this change of manage water for best value to the environment and the community actually a change that will take place up in the corner on this and not in this? Thank you. And yeah, all right. So that's how it's going to happen. You're just going to modify one of these little bizzos and this is going to stay exactly the same. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. That's all I needed to know.
Councillor Henschke.
Right, ready to go. Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to talk about koalas again. Very briefly, question to the administration. Koala management plans, fauna management plans, is it part of your action plan, which is coming next after this strategy, to look at koala population management? By any chance? Yeah.
Certainly, koalas and other wildlife can be discussed as part of the habitat management directions that are outlined in the strategy. So certainly something that could be discussed as part of the action planning.
Okay, that's great. So I'll speak to it now. And I've engaged with some people that live in the city of Burnside around parks and up against the Adelaide Hills, Stonyfell, for example. And one resident observes koalas trying to move from one property to another. It's like the pool fence story. Koalas like moving around, but the koalas can't actually climb over the metal fences and they struggle to get around. And one resident had this idea that, well, maybe we should talk about fencing residents could have. And now with more urban infill, I wonder if there's a possibility for us to encourage new infill development, especially when we have infill development up against parks and native vegetation areas, Beaumont Common, places like that. Encourage development to consider the option of fencing that does enable animals to cross and move around the area freely, whether it's fencing that, like the pool fence, so they can climb over it, or pool or brush fences. But this resident talked to me at length about his observations of koalas in that area, and I just want to raise awareness of, in this chamber of that. We have a very leafy green city, and koalas do move around, and it's a shame that they can't move freely from one garden to another in these and enjoy their in the habitats. So that's what I wanted to say to you all. Thank you.
You're on. It's evil Councillor 13 again. I just wanted to say, I mean, I don't hate this policy, but I think there's an elephant in the room, and Councillor Henschke just mentioned it. It's urban infill. We have all these policies we like, but Burnside's disappearing under concrete. I was on Sturdy Street the other day, blocks been totally levelled, every scrap of vegetation's been removed. They're sticking 4 units in, it'll be totally covered in concrete. So we can have all these canopy action plans, but the bloody place is going to disappear under concrete, and that should be in the policy. Council should be saying we are totally opposed to urban infill. We should be telling our planners, do not approve anything that is in violation of the guidelines. So if the minimum block size is 450 square metres, we should be saying the minimum block size is 450 square metres. Not 449, not 380 like was at the cap the other week. We're just saying no. We should be saying we're going to campaign against State Planning Commission's ludicrous 200 square metre minimum block size. And I think that should be in the policy, and I think the residents of Burnside will salute us if we did that. So that's just all I'm going to say.
Councillor Davey, to sum up. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Can I just take the opportunity to thank you for all the work on this strategy? The workshop that you provided us was great background. The paper is excellent, and in spite of Councillor Jones's comments, it's a necessary strategy, because if you don't have this underlying philosophy, then you don't have, there's nothing that you can fall back on in terms of what your goals and objectives are. So I want to thank you for the work that's gone into that. Eastern Waste Management Authority, motion to approve, please. Thank you, Councillor Jones, seconded by Councillor Piggott. I'm just going to use hands for this one, okay? Eastern Health Authority, sorry, voting, apologies, those in favour, against, carried. Eastern Health Authority, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Davey, all those in favour, carried. Eastern Health Authority Board meeting, recommendation 1422, Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Cornish, all those in favour, carried. Yeah. I just wanted to add one more item to that, and that is that I did attend the CAP meeting last week. Someone to move that, please. The Mayor's report. Thank you, Councillor Piggott. Seconded Councillor Jones. Those in favour? Carried. Reports of members of delegates and working parties. If there's anyone who wishes to add anything, otherwise it's taken as read.
Can I please? Yes.
Sorry, do you want to add something?
I'd like to add that attended my last council assessment panel meeting, and thank the members of the panel and elected members that have supported me through the year, and the residents who have put their submissions in to curb infill development. And I'm the acting president of the Community Alliance at the moment, while Councillor Crystal Mex will return, acting president of Community Alliance, Crystal Mex, Councillor of Norwood. And I participated in a protest. All right. In front of Stephen Marshall's office last Friday with the Community Alliance. Thank you.
That's private. You're not actually representing the council in that particular role, so I would leave that.
Okay, remove those out. Thank you.
Just that last.
Yep. And the one before. Yep.
Thank you, Worship. Something a bit out of left field, but it is important. And I think it's important that we recognise staff who achieve success. And I think it's important that we recognise that Michelle Kennedy has recently been elected to the Board of Governors for Saints Girls in Stonyfell. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
And congratulations. Okay, on behalf of council. Confidential, now we need to move into confidential items. Sorry, Councillor Cornish. We'd like to move to do number 2, and then 3, and then number 1. So if you do 19.2 first. So we've got to move into confidential mode, as read. Seconded by councillor Dawes. Those in favour? Those against? Carried.